Listen and follow.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, George Valenzuela.
This is education coach George Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it. We are here today with Dr. Jennifer Plucker. Jennifer is the Director of Learning and Development at Macklin Educational Resources and an educational consultant. And she's also a new friend of mine. How are you?
I'm great, and it's great to be here.
I love that you excel in three major areas of your life. Number one, you put your family first. Two, you're very dedicated to educational coaching and consulting. And three, you're very passionate about mentoring young people. Before we dive into these topics, please introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is Jennifer McCarty Plucker. I am currently serving as a Director of Learning at Macklin Educational Resources, as George mentioned, and I formerly spent almost 20 years in public education as mostly an English and reading teacher at the secondary level. I currently live in Rosemount, Minnesota. You might hear the accent throughout our conversation today with my husband and my dog, and we are starting to see what life is like as empty nesters.
For the audience, Jamila Loving at Solution Tree from time to time reaches out and she recommends folks that she feels would be an excellent fit for this show. Jennifer, you are one of those people, and I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you.
This is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast. And on this show, we focus on self-improvement by interviewing people who are excelling in three important areas of their lives so that we can learn from them and experience similar success. Jennifer, please tell us about your family and why putting them first is so important to you.
My husband, Carl, is a 7th grade American Studies teacher in the district that we live in. I tease because he's been in 7th grade for 25 years, so that always makes. But he's super dedicated to his students. He coaches several sports, and it's fun. When I was teaching, many of his students would come from 7th grade into high school. Many of them had Mr. Plucker as a 7th grade teacher, and it was fun to hear stories. For example, I didn't know that he sings Britney Spears in the classroom. We don't hear that at home. So it's fun to hear the goofy side of that. We met in college. We met in a creative writing class. Interestingly, he was the better writer of the two of us. He got better grades in creative writing than I did. We have 2 children. Our son, Andrew, just graduated from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. So we are now Husker fans, which is bittersweet. It's fun to be a fan, but it'll be really fun when they start winning football games. Their basketball team is a little better. He is now working in the Lincoln Public Schools as a paraeducator with students with behavior challenges at a middle school. He calls me almost every day on his way home to tell me stories about his challenging day and working with students, but I can also hear his heart for these students and how he can see beyond their behaviors. And he's really trying to make a difference for these kids. So that's been really fun. My daughter is a sophomore at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, which feels far away, but my husband's family is down there. So she does have a grandma and cousins and an aunt nearby. She is pursuing a degree in communications and marketing. She's in her 2nd year, but she'll graduate spring of next year. And then, of course, we have a little fluffy dog, Teddy Theodore Roosevelt. My husband is a social studies teacher. Teddy really is the ruler of the house. He decides everything. Pretty spoiled.
That is so funny. Our family has a cat named Graham. My family refers to him as the leader of the house. You're the second person I've heard say that. You have a family, almost all educators. It sounds like you guys are nearing the end. In fact, you did mention that it'll just be you and your husband. What's an important lesson that you learned as a kid, which has helped shape who you are now?
My mom has always been a fierce advocate for her family. That has absolutely impacted me and my husband in the way that we raise our family. As you mentioned earlier, family does come first. Even when I think about my hobbies, what are my hobbies? What are my kids into? So we watch Husker football games. We are watching a lot of Grand Canyon University basketball because it gives us that connection to Ainsley, who's in Phoenix. Just so happens they're doing very well this year. It has always been fun for us to do. My son was on the football team and the baseball team and involved in Civil Air Patrol and all of the things that he was doing. That's what we were doing. When my daughter was a dancer and had dance competitions and was on stage and in musicals and doing choir, that is what we were doing. And then we were on the parent organizations. When both of my kids were at the high school that I had formerly taught and coached at, I went back to coaching speech just to be a part of the activity that they were in. So family becomes passion, it becomes hobby. And my mom really started that when I was a child.
That is so fantastic. I think a lot of parents that I talk to wish that they can be more into what their kids are into. And it's fantastic that you had your parent teach you that, in opposed to us having to learn as we go along. So that's amazing. Jennifer, navigating relationships with family isn't always easy. What's your secret weapon?
We are truth tellers in our house. My husband, I would say, really leads that, but it's definitely at the core of who I am. I've always believed in honesty and integrity. We do have family meetings, and when our kids were younger and there were things that we needed to rumble through and wrestle through, we started with, "We love you unconditionally, but we tell the truth in this family. So have at it." What do we need to talk about? What's on the table? I think our kids often thought we knew already. They would just confess to whatever it was. We didn't always know. We feel when things are off. We could just sit down at the table and it wasn't comfortable, but on the other side, because the love is there, the truth always sets us free. It has built some really strong bonds and communication amongst our family.
So I do have a question for you. Does telling the truth go both ways, though?
It depends. If it's Christmas time and the kids, they're little and they want to know if Santa exists, all we have to say is, "You get presents on Christmas morning if you believe."
But I have a relative that loves to tell me the truth about myself.
Oh, I see.
But when it's reciprocated, it's not always well received. Is truth
I see
telling
what you're saying.
reciprocal in your home?
I would say that in the same way that it's uncomfortable when we tell the truth to our kids, it can be uncomfortable when they tell the truth to us. But I'm actually have been extraordinarily impressed just in the last 6 months with my daughter. She's matured a lot. She's spent a lot of time at college, and she has challenged me at times with something that I might say. She has asked me questions to get me to think about a perspective that I'm coming from that might not be as gracious. It's uncomfortable, but I hope that my kids would say that I still take it.
I've realized at 48, I'm probably not going to change my beliefs on certain things. And when my daughter, when she opposes me on my beliefs, I'm learning to listen, accept what she says, and just move on from it.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic answer. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors. Are technology issues slowing you down at your school? If that's the case, look no further than 5-Star Technology's Virtual Help Desk. Their team of experts are available to support you remotely, resolving up to 40% of common issues like password resets, device connectivity, and lots more. With just a few clicks, you'll have access to their live chat from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Just enter your email to get started. Then you'll live chat with one of 5-Star's EdTech experts to diagnose your problem. And if their virtual help desk agent can't solve the issue completely, they will dispatch the ticket to your school's on-site tech team. Let 5-Star Technology Solutions be your support partner. Experience their virtual help desk, which is affordable, efficient, and always there for you. Please contact them at 5startech.com/contact us. Once again, 5startech.com/contact us. And for your convenience, you'll find this link in the episode show notes. Now let's transition into educational coaching and consulting. You're a consultant with Solution Tree. Jennifer, how did you get started?
I have been doing consulting work with schools for now 11, 12 years. It's ranged from really part-time when I was still teaching or as a district administrator. In the little slivers of time, I was doing some work with districts. And then I transitioned out of public education and started a professional learning division at Mackin Educational Resources. We're a company that gets authentic texts in the hands of students, whether it's in their library, digitally on their device, or in their classrooms. That had allowed me more time to spend with teams of teachers who want to bring in more texts to their classroom, whether they're an English language arts teacher, a social studies teacher, a career education teacher. The idea of when we immerse students in text, we can really allow for inquiry to happen and open up their minds to multiple perspectives around a topic.
Most educational consultants agree that coaching adults isn't always easy. What's the toughest part for you, and how do you navigate that?
It can be really challenging. I find that one of the biggest challenges that I have is I do believe that the brilliance is in the room and that I'm not coming in with anything that is necessarily something that someone in the room isn't already doing. My job is to affirm what they're doing and to help organize and action plan the brilliance that is there. But sometimes that is met with resistance. I did have an experience one summer where I was doing an institute and the teachers had to be there. There wasn't any choice. They were paid to be there. And one educator brought his pillow. And he had made a very bold statement that I don't want to be here. I'm going to take a nap. It doesn't matter what you do. I just took an opportunity to build a relationship. Thankfully, I was coming back the next day and really tried to get to know what were some of the pain points that he was experiencing in engaging readers in his 9th grade classroom. I changed my whole presentation for the next day to really meet the needs of what he needed. I knew it would meet the needs of everyone else. I pulled examples that would speak to exactly what he needed to be able to find joy in his classroom and get his students engaged. I'm happy to say that the pillow went away and he was really engaged. And then fortunately, I had opportunities to go back to that district throughout the school year. And at one point received an email of how much he appreciated the work that we had done. So it is about meeting educators where they are and being really in tune so that we can be responsive in the same way that we want teachers to be responsive to students.
Being aware and then listening to the pain points of the audience is such an important thing. Expert Jim Kelly says that the audience is broken up into 3 segments. 10%, they're with you. Anything you say, they'll go along with it. There's a 10%, which sounds like it was that guy, but he changed over, is where there's nothing you can say. If Jesus was there as your co-presenter, they would not care. And there's 80%, and that's your target audience. In that 80%, there's some folks on the fence. That's true. But that target audience is looking for leadership. They're looking for actionable strategies. They're looking to see that we care. And if we do that by showing up, by paying attention to their pain points, not introducing any fluff and win them over, I really appreciate you saying that. Jennifer, being an educational consultant isn't easy. What are 3 pieces of advice you would give someone who's just starting out?
The best way I can answer this is 3 things I wish I would have known when I first started out. Number 1, I wish I would have known someone who could have sat down with me to talk about how to price consulting. Fortunately, had a district leader when I was first starting out who was really honest with me, and he said, "You're undervaluing your work." you are charging too little. I had no idea. I didn't have a mentor. I wanted to help people. I'm an educator. This is what we do. This person said, we're paying more for other consultants. And he was kind enough to coach me on that. I wish I would have had that mentorship even earlier. This falls into mentorship too, the area that I still struggle with. And honestly, listening to your podcast is pushing me for my 2024 goals. I struggle with self promotion. This idea of what do I put out on social media? What goes on my website? Because none of this has ever been about Jen Plucker. It's always been about the transformation that I have seen in my classroom and the research that I've done and the things that I've learned, I know make a difference for learners and brings joy for the educator. So it's that fine line of how do I get that message out there so that it doesn't come across like this is about Jen, and it's about sharing and supporting others like me out in the world. And what I come back to all of the time when I'm having my own self-doubt and self-talk is, where would I be as an educator if Kelly Gallagher and Penny Kittle and Stephen Lane and John Guthrie and Austin Buffum, I could name so many people who wrote books that I read that influenced my teaching. Where would I be if they didn't? Where would I be right now if John Spencer didn't put out his videos and put out this great content in the world? Where would we be if George didn't do the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast? I wish 10 years ago I would have had someone say that, because maybe I wouldn't have waited so long to get this on paper.
I didn't expect for you to say that. And John Spencer, if you're watching or listening, I'm a big fan of his videos as
Big fan.
well. And those other authors. Being an entrepreneur, it's important that we promote our work and let the world know what we're doing. But like you said, there's a fine line between promotion and self-promoting.
Mhm.
The audience gets tired of the agenda. Those speakers that have an agenda, the audience doesn't like that. When I do my videos, everyone knows is my podcast. Everyone knows is my brand. But if you notice that the videos are typically with the interviewee
Mhm.
saying what their nugget is. I believe Abraham Lincoln said this: by promoting others, you succeed as well. That's an important thing to do. On our social media, we should definitely show what our work is. And I believe that our personal brand is something that is really important. Lifelong learning, which, if you think about it, it's self-improvement for personal and professional learning. That's
Right.
my brand. So anyone on my show has to fit that brand.
Mhm.
Make sense? We start with family, we
Mhm.
start with work, but then a personal passion.
Mhm.
And that's what I think any influencer, any entrepreneur, any coach needs. They need to know what their brand is. Yours is obviously literacy. That's an important thing to you. We know that's part of your brand, and that's what
Right.
folks need to see.
Right.
Speaking of literacy, I believe that literacy is the most important academic skill we need to teach all young people. My opinion, I know it's not popular, but I believe that every teacher needs to be a literacy teacher. That doesn't mean that every teacher needs to assess reading and writing skills at the end of the year, but it does
Right.
mean that every teacher needs to integrate reading and writing into their subject matter. In reading your book, which is called Inspiring Lifelong Readers, I found some scary data. Would you mind if I read it real quick?
Go for it.
On page 5, it says, challenges abound for educators and learners when it comes to advancing literacy skills. Several assessments confirm the fact that high school students are not graduating high school with the literacy skills necessary for college and careers. I did not know that. Obviously, I knew that for certain communities, certain schools I'm in where there's high poverty, we do see lower scores, but it's saying across the board. Would you mind expanding on that?
Sure. We are seeing stagnant literacy in some pockets. It's really scary, but I don't believe that it is a doomsday story. We have incredible opportunities to advance literacy for our students when we do two things. One, we have to redefine literacy. If literacy is defined as Black print on white paper, like if that's what we think literacy is, just being able to read books, we're missing an opportunity to engage with our learners. because literacy is thinking. It is that idea of knowing where to find information and what do we do with that information and how do we evaluate that information? How can we synthesize it, remix it? That process of thinking, students can do whether it is this text, whether they're listening to a podcast, they're playing a video game, they're studying plays for the football game next weekend, they're putting together the choreography for their dance, all day, every day. Students can engage in literacy. So we want to redefine literacy so that it's not scary for all content area teachers, because you're right, they don't have to feel like they can grade a paper and correct grammatical areas to be a literacy teacher. But the best person to help our students navigate scientific texts is the science teacher. Because they read like a scientist, they write like a scientist, they understand science journals, they know how to read diagnostics. I was just at the doctor yesterday and he's pulling up all these charts and he's showing me different spine models. And I'm like, this is not a language that I speak. He has to know how to translate that because I have to go now and do the physical therapy and do the work.
That's such an interesting point, because in the Common Core and in other standards, like in Virginia, we have the SOLs. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening are spiraling standards that show up every year. I just think that whatever our subject is, you mentioned science, it could be art, it could be health and PE, it could be music. Teachers just have to look at the reading, writing, speaking, and listening aspects of their curricula. That's it. Just infuse that into what they do.
It almost sounds too simple, but if our students are reading, writing, and talking every day in every class, and it looks different in Phi-Ed, please don't stop them from learning their drills to write a paper. That is not what we mean. But can they chart their heart rate? Can they study that graph? Can they think about what that means for their individual fitness? That is reading, writing, talking the language of Phi-Ed. If they're in band and you want them to play a piece at the highest level for the concert, have them write while they're listening to it and make a personal connection to the music. Because as soon as they're personally connected to the music, they're going to play it better. You're always reading, writing, talking in pursuit of excellence for your discipline. And it looks different from class to class.
That is such an important thing. I really love the way you say that. I love your book, and I hope you sell 10 million copies.
Me too.
Jennifer, there's someone reading or looking at your book and they want to be an author. What advice would you give them?
I was a reluctant author. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but I also mentioned that a lifelong motto of mine has been listen and follow. I'm a woman of faith. When God tells me something to do, it doesn't usually serve in my best interest to not listen and follow. But I will say that writing this book, and I wrote it in the acknowledgments, was probably my largest act of rebellion in my life, because I really resisted. I didn't meet deadlines, which was not part of my personality. I'm an A student. I have my doctorate. I get my research done. Talk to anybody who knows me. I meet my deadlines, except for Amy, my editor, because I didn't meet deadlines. My advice is to not resist and not rebel, and to not worry about whatever gets in your way. For me, what got in my way was the perfection of formatting. So am I going to send this to my editor and the formatting isn't going to be right? And is this not the right story? It's a process. And so you get the final say of what ends up being published. I was in my own way. It took me too long to write the book. I really didn't think that I would ever be interested in writing another one. But I think you have a baby and you think, I'm never having a baby again. I'm not going through labor. I birthed a book and now I'm forgetting how painful a lot of that process was, because it is fulfilling. I think the part that I was the most insecure about was the peer review, because those are my people. Those are my colleagues. Those are principals and literacy coaches. I'm afraid of what they're going to say, but those are the people that I need to hear from. because they're going to give the feedback of where the changes need to be made and what's not making sense. And they were also the people that built my confidence that I do have something to say, and it is worth the effort to put it together and get it out there.
That is such a fantastic answer. And anyone out there listening, don't forget, there's a reason why we measure self-efficacy beliefs in academic research, because we want to make sure that people believe and feel good about performing certain tasks. And recently, I just completed my 3rd chapter of my dissertation. And I'll have to say, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But people have told me, and I guess it's true, but I'm not sure, but people have told me that you've done harder stuff than that, George, and just being an author. We'll see. And now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. They're having a bad day. A SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. Now let's talk about your passion for mentoring youth. Jennifer, how did you get started on your path of mentoring young people?
I had a mentor when I was in high school. I was extraordinarily quiet. I am an introvert by nature. I had a social studies teacher who came up to me and said, "You should audition for the high school speech team." And I was like, "Have you met me? I don't talk." And he said, "No, I've seen your writing and what you need to use your voice, and your voice can be in writing, but you need to use it." And I was like, "Okay, I'll try this." I auditioned for my high school speech team and had great few years on the team, served as speech captain, was able to use leadership skills I didn't know I had. And that process in high school of someone taking the time to see a gift in me, pushing me to do something I never would have thought. And now I do public speaking as a career, meant so much to me that I felt like I had to pay that forward. I went on to get my teaching degree and set out to coach a high school speech team, which makes sense. That's what did it for me. So I wanted to do that for others and found such joy in helping students discover their voice and their style and coaching state champions in storytelling. Each champion was very different in the way in which they did storytelling on the stage, because it was about figuring out who are you and what is your method for telling stories and how can we use your gifts to their fullest potential. And then excellence comes. We shoot for excellence, but we're shooting for the best possible version of ourselves. The trophies are just the result. It's not the goal, it's the result. So I coached high school speech for many years, loved it, but found then that the time that I was spending in that could be better spent in servicing people who didn't have their voice, which is a lot of the stories from the field in this book. I had students who were reading far below grade level and they didn't have a voice and they didn't have materials to support them and they didn't have teachers who knew what to do. I shifted then my attention towards my doctoral work and the work that is in the book. But then when I left teaching and didn't have sophomores every day to bring me joy, I love that age, I was looking, where am I going to get that? Because youth are our most underutilized resource. I learned so much from them. I want them to know that they can change the world. You don't have to wait to be a world changer. You can change it in your classroom, in your lunchroom, on your team. So I started volunteering at church on Wednesday nights with the youth group, and had a group of 9th graders that I worked with every year until they just graduated last year. And we'll be getting together next week, hopefully, to hear about their first year in college. Those are skills that they're going to take with them, and training that they're going to be able to do wherever they are.
That response was so good. We're not even going to ask you a follow-up question. Folks out there listening, folks watching, pour into young people and give them the things that they need now so they can be successful in the future. That is fantastic. We are now winding down with Jennifer, and we're going to get into the quick fire question round part of the podcast. Jennifer, what are your top 3 ed tech tools?
My top 3 ed tech tools that I'm using on the daily are ChatGPT, Canva, and Mattermost, which is our messaging software at my company.
What is your favorite education book other than yours?
It's not an education book, but it should be. My all-time favorite book is Drive by Daniel Pink, and it's the surprising truth about what motivates us. He talks about education a little bit in there, but it's really the full science of motivation and engagement.
Jennifer, what is your favorite education conference and why?
My favorite education conference is the REB, Southwest Regional Education Board High Schools That Work Conference. It's this summer. It will be in Nashville, Tennessee. I love it. It's great. And I don't know if it's as known as some of the other big ones.
Oh, I know it. Project-based learning is part of the instructional
Oh,
approach.
yes.
of all programs.
Yes. Yes.
I know them well. Jennifer, what are 3 things that people need to do every day?
Every day, pray, talk to your family or connect with your family in some way. We have a family group chat called Fam Bam, and that's how we stay connected with our kids in other states. And find a way to listen to some of your favorite music.
Jennifer, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and how has it influenced your life?
The best piece of advice that I've received in my life is from my mom. She taught us to follow our peace meter, is what she called it, but it's the Holy Spirit, really paying attention to where our peace level is at, because that will guide every decision that we make. If we're feeling dissonance, it's not time to make the decision. It's time to continue to reflect and pray. That then leads to that listen and follow motto. If I'm paying attention to my peace meter, I know when it's time to act.
Jennifer, I picked 3 things I love and respect about you. And just to recap for the audience, you put your family first, you're a great educational consultant, and you are passionate about pouring into young people. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want the audience to know about you?
I don't think so.
This is the part of the show where I give you your flowers. I don't believe in waiting until someone is gone to tell them how I feel about them. So here it goes. Jennifer, I don't know you very long, but I can tell just in our conversation from reading your book that you're passionate, not just about literacy. I think that's your subset, but I think your bigger passion is helping people. I can see that. It resonates in your answers and things that you care about, things in your book. And I think you're planting seeds that, although you may never get to see, those effects will be around long after we're gone. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's put this in the universe. How can people all over the world, not just in Minnesota, contact you, Jennifer, so you can speak at their conference, at their event, consult, and coach at their school? How can they get you?
You can find me at my personal website, which is jenniferplucker.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jen Plucker. You can also find me at mackinlearning.com, which is my company's website.
That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with George Valenzuela.